Professor Mike McCann discusses how a judge ruled in favor of NBA 2K's creators in a case brought by tattoo artists. This is The Legal Impact, presented by the University of New Hampshire Franklin Pierce School of Law, now accepting applications for JD graduate programs and online professional certificates. Learn more and apply at law.unh.edu. Opinions discussed are solely the opinion of the faculty or host and do not constitute legal advice or necessarily represent the official views of the University of New Hampshire. So, Mike, what case is this court decision centered around?
AJ, it's centered around copyright law and specifically in the context of video games. And here, the case is about the video game NBA 2K, which, as you know, is very popular. Last year, it was the second highest-selling game, and the highest-selling game ahead of Madden. And the controversy is about the avatars in the games who are based on real players, the tattoos that they have. So the game designers, Take-Two Interactive and 2K Sports, try to make the game as realistic as possible because that helps sales. It makes it more immersive to players. And in the course of doing so, they replicated the tattoos on players' arms so that they look just like the real ones. The legal issue is whether they had a right to do that because the tattoo artists, through a company which they're in contract with, Solid Oak, has said, you don't have a right to do that. You never paid us for the right to use the tattoos. There's a copyrighted design in those tattoos that you're infringing on. So the case centers on that very issue.
Now, this pops up to me as a photographer and videographer. Like, can you sue someone who took a photo of someone who happened to have that tattoo and then sell that picture?
Conceivably, yeah. I know. Now, this decision is going to say, good luck with that, because the decision ruled in favor of the video game publisher. And the reasoning for that was on several grounds. One is that the tattoos were so small that they're actually 1/10 or less than that of the real actual size in real life. And then in addition, the video game player barely notices the tattoos. It's a tiny, in most cases, it's blurred. And if you look at the game data, it's far less than 1% of the game data. And then there was also the argument that there's a transformative element, that the idea with the tattoo artist, when an NBA player hires a tattoo artist, he has this idea of getting a tattoo that's based on some individual, really, expression, that he wants a tattoo of a child or whatever it may be, that it's about identity. With the video game company, they argued successfully that their reasoning is totally different. They just want a copy. They literally are getting it to make it as real as possible. So there's a transformative element in the sense that their purpose is totally different than what the NBA player seeks. And there was also the argument of fair use and implied license, that they had a right to do it. They pay the NBA and the Players Association a lot of money to get the identity rights to players in terms of name, image, and likeness, that it should cover, at least implicitly, the tattoos. All of those arguments worked. Now, this could be appealed, and there could be competing arguments about how far does it go. I mean, if you pay for rights, does it include everything? It looks like the answer, at least according to one federal court, is yes, but we'll see if others agree.
Yeah, because there'd be huge industry-wide implications for sports journalism, I'd imagine, taking pictures of players on the court and things like that. I mean, this wouldn't just be limited to video games. Conceivably,
yeah. Now, the journalism, the media companies are going to say, well, there's a First Amendment right to report on what happens in a game. But if you take a photo of a game, it's within the confines of news reporting. A video game is in a different category. There's some element of informing the video game player about players, right? You may be a Celtics fan and not know that Marcus Smart has certain tattoos, and you're learning about them through the game. There could be some element of relaying information that might be relevant. But yeah, there's no question that this case has impact. Just how we evaluate information and who controls it and who can copyright information, or does it change once it goes into certain contexts? It's pretty interesting stuff.
Now, would there be like a First Amendment case to be made for the video game maker too, with regards that they want this to be as realistic and they're trying to make something that really puts the video game player on the court as in their minds as much as possible?
I think there is that possible argument, especially because games, as you know, now convey so much actual data, right? They're telling the gamer about a particular player, about the player's background and statistical information. Now that games are updated continuously. There can be scrolling of scores at the bottom of games. There are real scores that are being shown on the video game, that it's kind of morphing into, you could argue, more information, more reporting, more of a First Amendment issue. It's unsettled area.
And this is only going to get more in depth as virtual reality gets more developed and you get more into, they're talking 8K video to be coming out. Those little details are going to be more apparent.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why this decision is going to be good for video game companies, not so good for those who are involved in associated industries where they're changing players' identity. In the context of the tattoo, it changes the pigment of the skin. Is it now part of the player's body that it's no longer the design? As the games become more realistic, these issues could get really unique. Virtual reality, right? That's another game changer.
Is there any historical reference where something like this might have been a problem in the past?
We have seen elements of this before. There was a video game involving the UFC where a fighter had his tattoo in the game and the artist sued. The case was resolved before a decision because the company went bankrupt. But the artist was able to get some money from the bankruptcy, which suggested that perhaps there was some right in the tattoo being in the video game. In addition, there was a former NBA player named Rasheed Wallace who paid for a tattoo, and then Rasheed Wallace was in a Nike commercial, and they zoomed into the tattoo. The artist said, "You owe me money." And it was settled out of court, but it raises the issue of what are the rights that go with the tattoo?
Would you say just to have a decision, is it best for a decision to be made at this point by the court on how to handle these things?
It's always some risk, right? Because the technology, as you alluded to earlier, is changing. That there's a chance that a decision for a game on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One is not going to be good law when new video game systems come out, when the technology changes so that it's more interactive. So there's always some risk. On the other hand, this was the live case, and the judge had to make a decision. And the case involved 2K games from the mid-2010s, and the judge had to really rule on them.
And it's very specific. It wasn't some general calling out of 2K.
That's right. And it involved 3 NBA players rather than all NBA players. So some of the reasoning that it was a small portion of the data, if it were, say, a class action of NBA players, perhaps there would be a stronger case. Now, there are other reasons that the judge gave, which would suggest probably not. But the idea of the tattoos that were in the game being a small portion of the data, that becomes a less powerful argument the more players that are suing. In this case, it was only 3 players.
Thanks for listening to The Legal Impact, presented by UNH Franklin Pierce. To help spread word about the show, please be sure to subscribe and comment on your favorite podcast platform, including Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Also visit the show page at law.unh.edu/podcast.